Morning, everyone. Welcome to BERC's 8th Annual Energy Conference. It was great seeing so many of you last night at the Innovation Expo at the Berkeley Art Museum. I'm Dan Sanchez, a current co-president of the Berkeley Energy and Resources Collaborative, and I'm here with my other co-president, Tia Hansen, today. Today we'll be discussing the theme of our conference, which is collaborative innovation and systemic change. And that's really about how leaders across UC Berkeley can work together to expand the horizon of energy innovations. We've gathered over 500 participants to take part in the energy conference, both here today as well as last night at the Innovation Expo, again at the Berkeley Art Museum. And I'm really excited for a vigorous exchange of ideas.
Today we will hear from several distinguished panelists and keynotes, but before we start, I want to take a moment to recognize and thank our phenomenal conference planning team. If you guys would stand up. We have Jess Havik, Shaila Narang, Noah Deitch, Molly Stark, and Chad Reed. They've done a phenomenal job, and they've really worked hard since December to make this day possible, so feel free to grab them if you have any questions.
So today we're going to hear not only through panels, we have panels on the future of fossil fuels, on commercialization, on sustainable cities, and on energy access. We're also going to hear from several distinguished keynotes, as well as having an afternoon plenary. You can find all of the information you need about where these panels are, about who's speaking on them, about speaker bios, about our sponsors, on the BERC Energy Summit app. And so I have my phone here for a reason. It's really easy to get, and we want all of you to have it. If you search in any app store for BERC, you will find the 2014 Energy Summit app. We're doing a lot of different things with that today. As I mentioned before, it has all the information you need about the panels and about locations. You should also create a public profile and use the activity feed to post pictures, to post questions, to find other people who are attending. We have a leaderboard for whoever takes part the most. I think I'm in second place right now. We have also designated a hashtag for the summit, which is just hashtag BERC Summit. You can use that on any social media platform. Please, I think we can use social media today as well as the BERC app to really kind of deepen the conversation and just exchange more ideas. If you have any questions throughout the conference, please grab a volunteer. They are people that are wearing gray t-shirts that say BERC on them. You probably saw them as you were checking in. So if you have a question, if you need anything addressed, grab a BERC volunteer. And just the last logistical note, we're doing question and answer for the keynotes as well as for the plenary session using the app. So again, make sure you download it. Through the activity feed, you can click on the top right corner and just post a question right there on the activity feed. We'll be monitoring them, and just to kind of streamline the questions, we'll be passing them along to the keynotes and for the plenary panel. That's probably the last logistical note.
Thank you, Dan. It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the day, Governor Granholm. From 2003 to 2011, Jennifer Granholm served as governor of the great state of Michigan. During her tenure, she pioneered clean energy policies, working with both businesses and policymakers to create new economic opportunities for Michigan. We are lucky and privileged to have her now as part of the Berkeley community, where she is serving as a distinguished professor and senior research fellow. So please join me in welcoming Governor Jennifer Granholm.
Thank you, Tia and Danny, you guys, and your great leadership in this. You've, it's sometimes hard to be co-leaders, and you've obviously figured that out very well, so the community benefits. And I want to thank you all for coming out early to hear not a technical expert, not somebody who is on the business side, but somebody who's on the policy side. How many of those of you here are studying engineering or science or in that sort of field? There's, a good number of you. Okay, so I apologize. I'm a mere political scientist. But my laboratory was the Laboratory of Democracy, that is Michigan. And so I want to share with you some data from my lab. And that data really surrounds the advent of three problems. And problem number one is the loss of middle-class jobs. I really want to talk to you about what happened to me in Michigan as governor, really not what happened to me, but what happened to Michigan when I was governor in terms of the loss of these jobs, and why I am completely obsessed with how you can create jobs in a global economy in the United States in clean energy. So I want to share with you a story. So this is the beautiful state of Michigan. How many of you have ever been to Michigan? Oh, look at all of you who's from Michigan. All right, a couple souls. All right, that's awesome. Well, look at that. Who wouldn't want to be there? It's got more miles of shoreline than any state in the country other than Alaska. Can you believe that? California doesn't beat us, Florida doesn't beat us, but because of the Great Lakes, Michigan has more miles of shoreline than any state in the country. So I was elected in 2002, took office in January of 2003, and for any of you who remember anything about the recent economic history of this country, in 2003, the nation was just coming out of a recession. And my advisors were saying to me, oh, what a great time to be elected governor, because we're coming out of this recession. All these jobs will start to be created in Michigan, and you, as governor, will get the credit for it. So, at the end of my first year in office in 2003, after all the economists said that we would start to see jobs being created in Michigan, I get a call from the head of our Michigan Economic Development Corporation. And he says, we got a big problem, Gov. We have a little tiny community called Greenville, Michigan, right in the middle of the state. And Greenville is about to lose their major employer, which is a refrigerator factory operated by Electrolux. Now, those of you who have taken my classes before, I tell this story because it's such a tipping point story for me, a story that I thought was I'll just tell. So he said, this little tiny town of Greenville only has 8,000 people. And the Electrolux factory that was in Greenville, employed almost 3,000 of the 8,000 people. So if you can imagine, with grandparents and children, this is a one-company town, right? Everybody works at the refrigerator factory. Well, they were about to go to Mexico. And so I said, are you kidding me? We are not going to allow this huge manufacturer in this little community in the middle of the state in my first year in office to go away. We're going to go to Greenville and make them an offer they can't refuse. Not like Chris Christie or anything, but we're going to make them an offer to stay. And I brought my whole cabinet with me to Greenville. And we met in the Greenville City Hall. And the Greenville City Hall was about the size of like the first 5 rows right here. And all of the grand poobahs of Greenville were there, the mayor and the city manager and the head of the community college, the head of the Chamber of Commerce, the head of the UAW who represented the workers. And we all said, all right, what are you going to put on the table to keep Electrolux inside of Greenville? So we all basically sort of emptied our pockets of chips, made a pile of chips, and slid the pile across the table to the management of Electrolux. And in the pile of chips were things like 0 state and local taxes for 20 years, or we would help to build them an entire new factory, because as you can see, the factory was getting kind of old. We would help to finance that. And the UAW was going to put such a huge amount of concessions on the table. They didn't want anyone else to know because they didn't want others to ask for the same level of concessions, but they were so desperate to keep these jobs in Greenville. Well, the management of Electrolux took our list of incentives and they went outside the room for 17 minutes. And they came back in and they said, wow, this is the most aggressive any community has ever been in trying to keep jobs in their community. But there's nothing you can do to compensate for the fact that we can pay $1.57 an hour in Juarez, Mexico. And so we're going. And so this is a guy leaving on the last day. This is a picture of the factory being blown up, which was like a nuclear bomb that descended over the community. And this is a picture of the new facility in Juarez, Mexico. And when on the last day, or the last month, that the last refrigerator came off the assembly line, these employees had this gathering that they called the Last Supper. It was at this big pavilion in Greenville. And I went to this Last Supper, even though I was not invited, because I was still obsessed with the fact that he said to me and to us, there's nothing you can do to keep us from going, nothing. And I went into the room, and it was in a very large indoor pavilion, bigger than this room, and there were 1,000 people in there, all eating out of boxed lunches around 8 top tables. And I went up to the first table, and this guy stands up right away, and he has his daughter stand up. And he's got his hair in a ponytail and his tiger cap on, his tattoos, and he says to me, he says, "Governor," he says, "these are my 2 daughters." He said, "I want you to know that I have worked in this factory for 30 years. I'm 48 years old. I went from high school to factory. And my father worked in this factory. My grandfather worked in this factory. And all I know," he said, "is how to make refrigerators." And he looks at his daughters, and he puts his hand on his chest like this. And he says, "So, Governor, I want you to tell me, who is ever going to hire me? Who is ever going to hire me?" And that question was asked by that guy and by everybody in the room that day, and frankly, by everybody in one of the 60,000 factories that were closed in America between 2000 and now, about 2000 and 2014. 60,000. Now, we're never going to be able to keep these repetitive motion kind of jobs. But the kicker is, we're not even trying to keep the advanced jobs in this country. So this is what obsesses me. In fact, there was a study that was recently done by a Nobel Prize-winning economist named Michael Spence, where he evaluated the structural changes in the nation's economy. And he found all of those arrows that are going up are the jobs that were increased between 1990 and 2008. All of those jobs are in the services sector. The downward arrows are all the jobs in the manufacturing sector. And so he discovered that 97% of the jobs created between 1998 and 2008, 97% were in the services sector. We talk about the hollowing out of the middle class. Services jobs generally are lower paying. This is where the hollowing out of the middle class has occurred. It's the loss of the tradable goods sector, the manufacturing sector in this country. 97%. That's the first problem from my lab. Second problem you're all well aware of, problem you're here for today, is climate change. I don't have to say any of this. Between people who are interested in this, which is smaller than it should be, and the priorities of people, we have a little bit of a conflict. In fact, the Pew Charitable Trust does a study every single year about Americans' priorities. And this is a problem, because every year, the top priorities are always jobs in the economy. The bottom priorities are global warming, climate change, et cetera. It's happened for years and years. The public is still not there unless it's framed as jobs. That's problem number 2. Problem number 3 is Congress. So, how many of you have seen these polls that are relentless, talking about how bad Congress's approval rating is, right? How low can it go? Yesterday, there was just another one out. It's so boring. So this polling group called Public Policy Polling, decided we are tired of just gauging the relative unhappiness of people with respect to Congress. So let's compare Congress's approval rating with that of a number of unpleasant things. And so they found that Congress is in fact viewed worse than cockroaches, lice, root canals, the band Nickelback, Donald Trump, dog poop. They're worse than toenail fungus. It's worse than potholes, worse than hemorrhoids. Oh my God, worse than heroin. What are we going to do? Well, the good news is that at least Congress's approval rating was better than meth labs, Charles Manson, and gonorrhea. And I know you're happy I didn't show a picture of gonorrhea. But the question for us is, given these three problems, what are we going to do about getting something done on climate and jobs in America? What can we do? So in a rational world, we would convince Congress to invest in creating clean energy policy and an infrastructure bank and investing in industrial clusters in a rational world. But this is not a rational Congress, so what can we do? I say, keep calm and go around. Let's go around Congress. Who needs them anyway? So I think it's time, we talk about disruptive policy in the Bay Area, technology in the Bay Area all the time. Let's talk about disruptive policy. So this is my question to you, smarty pantses out there, any of you who followed tech policy. What was the Obama administration's most successful, effective policy that caused massive voluntary changes across the country? Voluntary changes. So don't say the Health Care Act. What was it? No, not fuel economy standards, because that was just done from Washington. What? Not retrofitting. Get out of the energy space. Education. You know what it was? It was race to the top. Why is this? Because 48 states competed in this competition, and 48 governors convinced 48 state legislatures to essentially raise their high school standards to a college prep curriculum. What did the administration do to get all these states to do it? Well, they didn't adopt a federal policy mandating it. What they said was, we will put a little pot of money on the table, $4.5 billion. You may sound like a lot, but it's actually 0.1% of federal spending. So they put this money on the table, and they said, governors, if you want to compete for that money, you just have to raise your high school standards. And that's the price to enter the competition. That doesn't even guarantee that you win anything. 48 states competed. Only 4 got any money in the first round. So only 2 states didn't. Which 2 states weren't they? Best guesses. Texas and South Carolina. Texas and South Carolina were the 2 states that did not participate, but every other one did. So, what you effectively did was created a national policy from the bottom up. So, what a moment for us to think about. What could this look like in the energy space? Could you see a new progressive federalism? Federalism, has been viewed in a very negative way by the progressive community because, of course, states' rights meant that there was an awful lot of, anti-voting, Jim Crow, defense of racist policies. But what if there was a new progressive economic federalism, which really empowered and encouraged the states to act? What if you had distributed policy strategies instead of just distributed generation, or in addition to distributed generation? What if you encouraged the states? So if not Congress, who could stoke this by the states? You might look at something like Silicon Valley. I was telling a group right before this, I don't know if any of the business students who I met with were here, but this is my fantasy. My fantasy is that the president, in the next State of the Union address, invites a billionaire's box to sit up and overlook. So they have Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Michael Bloomberg, Sergey Brin, Tim Cook. You have this group of billionaires up in the box, and the president announces that the billionaires have challenged Congress to create a race to the top for clean energy jobs. And the challenge is that they will put in $3 for every $1 that Congress puts in to get a pot that's roughly equivalent to the pot that was for the race to the top for education. And then the states have the opportunity to compete for that pot. And the states could say, you would say, the price to enter is that every state has to have a renewable portfolio standard equivalent to what the president wanted on a national level. So 80% by 2030, broadly defined. You would be able to create national energy policy if you had a private sector challenge. And frankly, if Congress didn't step up with their dollar, Silicon Valley could do it anyway, because they're wealthy enough to be able to do it. And by the way, competitions we know work enormously, not just race to the top, but you've got private sector competitions like the X Prize, the Google Challenge for the for the fiber. Oh my gosh, you had over 1,100 cities compete for that. And did you see what these cities did to try to convince Google to select them to essentially be a monopolist for for high-speed fiber in their city? They laid in the image of Google out in the field to say, pick us. They had all these people shaped in the G image. I mean, they did amazing things in addition to that, including tearing down the permitting barriers, et cetera. So I say, let's respect the states. You know who that is, right? Let us empower the governors to be able to, and incentivize the governors to be able to create clean energy policy. And now you have this push from the EPA. That is this great moment, because what Rule 111D is, which is this new clean power proposal by the EPA, says that we've got, as states, you have to reduce your carbon footprint by 30% by 2030. And you have to start putting pen to paper on how you're going to do that starting in June. And states can do it in whatever way they want. So they're already starting to look at how states can be uniquely allowed to reach the goals. But as you probably are aware, this Rule 111D, if any of you have been following this, has caused a lot of people's pants to get in a wad. There's a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth on the part of many states who are suing the EPA. Oh, it's going to hurt our economy. This is going to be the end of the world. And I say, let us not look at this in fear, but as a moment of prosperity. Because what the EPA has done is sent a market signal that the products that are going to be necessary to reduce carbon are going to be in huge demand across our country and across the globe. So why wouldn't we, as a nation, be making those products here? Why wouldn't we see this as a moment where we can capitalize on creating jobs and creating prosperity? So this is the truth, that every single state in the country has something to offer to this clean energy space. So you've got the solar states, you have biofuels, you have energy efficiency in the Northeast, you've got offshore wind on the Atlantic coast, you've got hydro power all along the Northwest, you've got obviously the wind states, you've got solar thermal, you've got batteries. Florida alone, for example, they have their opportunity in biofuels and solar is enormous. In fact, we are doing something through the Berkeley Energy and Climate Institute called the American Jobs Project, where we have identified 10 states to create industrial clusters surrounding clean energy, including the policy necessary to make them really be stoked. Florida has 4 of those clusters. 2 of them are right there. In Pennsylvania, another of our states, they want to look at creating the products for smart buildings and for wind. And of course, Nevada, you've got Tesla that has obviously a huge opportunity for lithium-ion batteries, as well as they're going to power that plant with 100% renewable energy, geothermal and solar and wind. What an amazing market opportunity to be able to build there. In Michigan, this fabulous state, we really went after the lithium-ion battery for the electric vehicle as well. And as a result of policy that we put in place back in 2006, we now have 258 clean energy businesses, $9.4 billion invested, 89,000 projected jobs in this space. The bottom line is that policy matters in the renewable and clean energy space. So what is the current way we are doing economic policy and job creation in the country? You've got people like Rick Perry, the governor of Texas, coming to California to poach jobs. But it wasn't just him. I did it too. Every governor does this. You go to another state and you say, hey, I'm going to give you some incentives. Come to my state. And so all these governors are competing for the same jobs inside of our country. What a terrible national economic strategy that is, right? They even have a magazine that's called Site Selection Magazine, where they award every year a governor's cup to the governor who has poached the most jobs and businesses. It's insane. Why not have, as a national strategy, states really decide what their competitive advantage is in particular products and allow those to soar rather than competing against one another? And this is why we are doing this American Jobs Project, is really to provide the research base to do this. So we all know what the amount of clean energy investments are from the Pew Charitable Trust does this study every year, $2 trillion in 2013, $2 trillion of private sector money that's being invested globally. And the question is, where is that money going? Well, China is the mother of all markets, big opportunity. Last year, China had $61 billion worth of private sector money invested in clean energy. The US had $48 billion. We used to be number one, but China, because of policy and real strategic focus, has jumped over us. We know the jobs numbers associated with clean energy. There's supposed to be 37 million jobs created by the year 2030. The question is, where are those jobs going to be created? And are we going to even compete for them as a country, right? So, I don't know, did any of you read George Bush's biography, Decision Points? Nobody? Okay, well, I read it, and in it, he tells a story about what he used to ask world leaders to break the ice. And the story he used to ask, or the question he used to ask, was this. He used to say to world leaders, hey, what keeps you up at night? And of course, what kept him up at night was the fear of terrorism, right? When he asked this question of Hu Jintao, in China, Hu Jintao said, what keeps me up at night is creating 25 million jobs a year for my people. I want leaders who are kept up at night about how to create jobs in America for our people. That drives me crazy because we can either be at the table or we can be on the menu. And I don't know about you, but I want to know who can ensure that we are not on the menu. Who is going to create good jobs and reduce our carbon footprint? Who can challenge the governors to be able to create clean energy jobs? Who's going to save our planet from death and destruction? Is it going to be Jerry Brown? Is it going to be Gina McCarthy at EPA? Is it going to be our next president, whoever she is? Or perhaps, it's going to be you. Now I know we're going to do some questions, right? All right, awesome. Who's doing it?
Hi, thank you for such a compelling presentation just now. We have a lot of questions and you addressed a number of different topics, so they kind of run the whole gambit. But to kick us off, I would like to combine two questions. Chris Riley asked, or made a statement that, this moved. Governor Granholm focused on energy policy from the perspective of jobs, and is that because climate change is a dirty word in modern politics? And to kind of build off of that, Jess Hovick asked, education isn't nearly as controversial as clean energy, and would 48 states really compete in this clean tech challenge? And how would you convince them if it isn't climate change that they're fighting for?
Okay, so this is why, oh my gosh, that's probably some Republicans putting, just kidding. My dad's a Republican. I love good Republicans. The issue about what language you use is really important. This is why I put up that Pew poll. People they don't care about climate change so much. Some of you, you guys do, but the average soul out there in America just doesn't. So don't spend a huge amount of time on that argument. Spend a huge amount of time on the argument that people care about. This would be what I say from a political point of view. The argument that wins every time, hands down, is jobs and economic opportunity. And by the way, you can address climate as well. So let's focus on the argument that is a winning argument in America and get national energy policy that achieves the goal we all want to see too. You can have it be a win-win. And there was this great article in The Atlantic last month which talked about how people view climate change and what are the effective things. People, when they hear, yeah, the oceans are rising and in 100 years, it's going to rise a foot or whatever, people are like, in many states, cold states, climate change, global warming, they're like, oh, great. So it's very simplistic, but I'm telling you, you would waste a huge amount of psychic energy arguing on that side when you can get it much more easily talking about jobs. And so that's why I say that. Education is really popular, but jobs is even more popular. And so if you had a clean energy jobs race to the top, I think you would see all these governors participating because they know their industries inside of their states will benefit by creating demand for those products. All of these governors want to see manufacturing in their states. All of these governors want to see middle-class jobs in their state. It is the primary driver of their existence. I'm just telling you. And it's not just because I was the governor of a state where the auto industry went bankrupt and jobs was the number one and still is the number one on everybody's list. It is true in all states. They are focused on jobs and creating opportunity for their people. This is the mother of all opportunities, this clean energy sector. That is why you can have a win-win, but focus it on jobs.
Thank you. And so I have a question now from Winston Lazar. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Clean energy deployment is often hindered by outdated and fragmented market regulations. What is the most exciting and potentially effective state-level model to rethink regulatory framework?
Yeah, this is a great question. In fact, I was just talking about this with some of the business students as well. Actually, I think the most exciting model is not in the US, but it's in British Columbia. British Columbia has adopted, for those of you who aren't aware, a fee and dividend system where they put a price on carbon, but they have required that the revenue that's generated as a result of that price on carbon be rebated back to people and to businesses who are reducing their footprint. So you've got both a carrot and a stick, and in fact, the minister who oversees this, according to the British Columbia law, I don't know if it's a criminal offense. I think it even may be a criminal offense if any of the money is siphoned off, even a penny is siphoned off to the general fund and not refunded to the people. It is an enormously, it was, I'm sure, very controversial when it was adopted, but it's now become enormously popular because citizens get a check back, businesses get a check back. I'm just saying, those kind of global policies where you can see some best practices, that's what we're looking at the American Jobs Project. We want to be able to identify what can create jobs and what policies can have good impact that the business community can buy into.
Excellent. Thank you. And I have a question now from Alex Chun, who asks, if we can't depend on Congress, who is going to make this challenge happen? And if it is at all national policy driven, then how do we stop the obstructionist Congress from intervening?
Yeah, that's this really is the gist of my presentation is that I think if we can go around Congress, we should. The nice thing about this race to the top concept, and it doesn't, jobs are an incentive in and of themselves. So this American Jobs Project that we are doing the research on is providing every state a jobs number. If they adopt policies, these jobs will be created. We're identifying these industrial clusters, et cetera. That's some incentive, and we're hopeful that it's enough. But if you had a private sector challenge to the governors, if you had a Google challenge to the governors would do backflips to be able to have a piece that, even more than Congress. If you had them banding together to do this, and they all care about this, they say they all want to have, data centers. Google does, Facebook does. They want to have data centers that are, run on renewable energy. If they really do, and they challenge the governors, I am just saying, I know you would have not 48, but you would have all 50 governors competing. And by the way, governors, not only are we competitive just sort of generally, the National Governors Association has a meeting twice a year, and we all, get around the table, and we're all like, I got that, business from you guys. I got that business. We're always like jockeying for this. So if you had a pie that was enabling us not to have to go poach from one state to another, that would just be such a win for the country. So going around Congress, I think, is strategy number one, or at least shaming Congress to put some money in would be strategy number one. Number two would be going around them entirely. And three, I would say that Congress, even the most conservative members, really appreciate efforts to allow the governors to have the freedom to do stuff, to allow the governors to decide whether to opt in or not, to allow the governors to fashion a solution that works for them, given their incumbent industries and their resource endowments. So I think that an economic federalism, if you will, would resonate on both sides of the aisle.
Excellent. Will Coleman makes an interesting point here. He says that I'm nervous about focusing on jobs over economic growth, mostly because it has been shown that people fear loss twice as much as they value gain. And the existing fossil fuel industries employ many more people than the emerging industries do. We are promising new jobs, and they're threatening the loss of, but at the same time threatening the loss of jobs. And so how do we overcome that fear?
Yeah, I would push back a bit on whether the old fossil fuel industries employ many more people than the emerging industries, because the emerging industries are much broader, much more growing, and the fossil fuel industries, in fact, are shrinking. But I do think this is a really important point, and you have to be sensitive to the fact that states, like my Greenville example, there are mining communities in Virginia where real people are employed and have families that are based upon getting a paycheck from a coal company. And so we cannot, as those who want to see changes, we cannot brush over that. That is very real for those families, which is why any strategy has to include a vision for them of what they could be doing, which is one of the reasons why the ability to transition workers to a clean energy job, whether it's installation of efficiency materials or retraining people for advanced manufacturing, there has to be an aggressive training strategy that has a job attached at the end. And any state that's devising a strategy that does not have that is missing the boat. So let me just give you a quick example. In Michigan, when we were losing all of these auto jobs and all the auto supplier jobs during the economic meltdown, people did not see a future for themselves. So I stood up, in fact, I felt like Bob Barker or whatever at my State of the State address, and I said, first come, first serve, the first 10,000 people who come in the door and who want to be retrained in an area of need, because we were diversifying our economy, including into clean energy, we will pay for your tuition at a community college, $10,000 per year. Got the federal government to give me waivers to allow us to do that. But training people for specific sectors in partnership with specific growing industries has got to be a part of this, because otherwise the fear is greater than hope. And you have to be able to give people a lot of hope and see a future that's in it for them.
Excellent. And then we have a number of questions about priorities, and this relates to a number of different topics. So prioritizing jobs or clean energy on against the other national or state level priorities, but then also if we consider this as a national strategy, then finding some sort of priority or balance between competition and collaboration with international partners, particularly India and China.
So one, the international aspect of things, you're seeing an awful lot of states go to other countries, sign memoranda of understanding on shared research, et cetera, shared opportunities, and I think that's great, as long as that MOU doesn't end up sending the manufacturing jobs over there and just keeping the research jobs here. In this in this moment where you have got a very sophisticated development of clean energy, complex clean energy products, where you embed hardware and software together, where you've got the Internet of Things, where you've got big data, et cetera, when you need, the greater the complexity of a product, the more likely it is that you'll be able to have a case to manufacture it in the United States or in an advanced industrial nation. And that's really what you want to go for. The opportunity with partnerships overseas is to be able to fill in supply chains with foreign direct investment, invite international companies to come here, learn, et cetera, be able to take and hopefully supply their country with the technology that will help them to reduce their footprint. I also think, though, that trade agreements need to be really clear that we should be trading with countries that have similar standards as us. If you want to be able to have a partnership or to send your products, everybody should be operating on the same level. So we may not be able to get Kyoto again, but we can, or we can't. It doesn't appear that Congress is going to approve any international climate change treaty, but through the trade agreements, you better believe we should be able to have solid environmental standards and require our trading partners to abide by the same rules. So there's an important opportunity there. I do think that this is a moment where you need collaboration both at the international level and at the national level as well, and inside of a state. So blended funding streams, leveraging the private sector, public-private partnerships, creating the triple helix of government, education, and private sector inside of states, incredibly important. Any of you who are interested in going into policy now must know that the world has changed, that government isn't going to be providing everything, but government can help to leverage partners to be able to move everybody down in the same path. And that aspect of collaboration is really important if we are to achieve success in climate, who knows if we have to work on the success part. But just quickly, the first question you asked about jobs versus the environment, it's not versus, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. We cannot be saying either or. It is the same thing. It just gets to the same end in a way that is more palatable to most people across the country.
Cool. So to wrap up, I would like to bring us back to your conclusion of your presentation and commenting on education, the role of higher education, and then the role that Berkeley can play in particular. What do you see as our role in moving your plan forward?
Well, I see you all as the role. I mean, truly, you all, those of you who are students here, you are at the best public university in the world, right? And you're here because you have these amazing skills. You wouldn't be here were it not for the talents that you have. You've been selected out for some reason, and that some reason, as you all know, or you wouldn't be here today, is not to serve yourself, but to be beyond yourself. And so the incredible abilities of those who are in this room to be able to carry forward, not just obviously the messages that you're going to be hearing throughout this entire conference, and the solutions to be able to solve the biggest problem facing the planet is, it's in your hands. And so my wish for you all is that you go forth and conquer this problem with great zeal and gusto, because we are going to need all hands on deck. Thanks so much.